Welcome everyone in the session on the implementation of automated road transport, predictions and implications for efficient and equitable transport planning. Before the introduction of the speakers, I would like to give you a brief introduction to the Hopin platform. So some housekeeping. In the session, please always use the chat function to comment about the session itself, not to ask questions from the panelists, but to general comments on the chat or general conversation between the participants. Please submit your answers to the poll section for the questions which are going to be asked. We have 5 poll questions in this session. I'm going to launch the polls in the same time when the speakers are asking me. So every time when there is a poll, just please click on the poll section and you are going to see the actual poll, and please cast your vote, and then we are going to show the results. View who is attending in the People tab. You can see all the people who are currently in the session through the People tab. Ask the questions in the moderated Q&A area. If you have any questions throughout the presentations, please ask your question through the Q&A. Maximize your screen by hiding the chat or tapping the full screen icon just shown on the slide. This meeting is being recorded. Recordings will be made available online after the conference. Please keep your microphone muted when not speaking, and when speaking, be brief and to the point. After the session, you can check the event chat, the polls, the results of the polls, the people who participated in the session, and the Q&A tabs, which questions people asked during the session. Then you can discover other upcoming sessions on the session tab on the on the left side. Also try the networking function. Through the networking function, you can connect with all people participating during the conference. You can also send direct messages to other participants. This direct messages function is outside of the session chat, so you are directly sending messages to people who are participating during the whole conference. This is just detailing what I already said. And that's it from my side. So the session speakers, I would like to welcome Esen Köse from Mpact and Todd Litman from Victoria Transport Policy Institute. And I also would like to welcome the moderator of this session, who is Torben Quickert from the city of Bremen. And now the floor is yours, Torben.
Hi, Banish. Thank you for your introduction. And if you know all guys who just coming into the session, how close it was that was not part of this session, because just a few issues regarding to my, due to my laptop and my adjustments in my browsers, but just in time I'm in. And so I welcome again you to this session on implementation automated road transport. And we have 3 presentations, so I'm not just the moderator, I'm also presenter by the end of our session. And so we are 3 people who are motivated to tell you what are the challenges and risks, what are the methods, and what maybe the predictions we have or we can consider regarding to automated road transport and how we can implement it into sustainable future of mobility. So Esen and Todd were already introduced, but we're starting with the presentation of Todd, and he's from Canada. He's from Victoria, Columbia, Canada. So he had to be wake up early. So he is, I think, 8 hours back in time. So welcome, hello, Todd, to Canada, and the floor is yours with your presentation.
Thank you very much, Torben. Greetings from British Columbia, way on the west coast of Canada. My name is Todd Litman with the Victoria Transport Policy Institute, and I'll be talking about autonomous vehicle implementation predictions. How soon you can fire your chauffeur because your car will drive itself. Let's see. So I want to first start off mentioning that this really is very important. Transportation affects our lives. It affects our days. Most people spend 60 to 90 daily minutes out of home travel. It's a major portion of household budgets. It affects people's economic opportunities and their social life. The streets are a public realm, so they're where people interact. It affects economic productivity and health and safety, and transportation decisions have tremendous impacts on a community, the external costs. So in the past, there were very exciting images, ideas about how we would travel. Some people predicted that we would have flying cars and jetpacks and segways, and that people would be able to travel to the moon on commercial spaceships. That hasn't really happened. What is the most important new form of transportation? What form of transportation has really affected people's lives? It's wheeled luggage. It's the new form of pedestrian freight travel. And that is the new type of transportation that really does affect a lot of people's day-to-day travel. I want to introduce my presentation with this to remind people that sometimes the new forms of transportation are not high technology. They're simply improvements in the way people get around using current technologies. Okay, so let's talk about autonomous vehicles. The question that we're going to explore here is, how will they affect our lives and communities, and how should we prepare for them? There are various levels of autonomy. So right now, a lot of cars have what the engineering community calls level 1. So some sorts of driver assistance, like automatic speed control. And then there's partial automation, where the vehicle can follow a traffic lane, but still needs the driver in the driver's seat. The point at which a driver is not needed, that's considered level 4, high automation. The vehicle is capable of performing all driving functions under certain conditions. And level 5, that's the level that's necessary so that a vehicle can drive itself under all normal conditions, doesn't need a driver. And so, for example, it could go to a destination empty, pick up a passenger, transport them, and then return to its base again empty. That's level 5. Now, there are various ways that autonomous vehicles could be, various operational models or business models. One is that people own their own autonomous vehicles. You have a self-driving car in your driveway. The second is that the autonomous vehicles are shared. So, for example, you have a self-driving taxi. And the third level is shared trips. So not only are you sharing the vehicle, but one passenger is entering that vehicle, a self-driving, what is often envisioned as a micro transit, say a small bus that picks up and drops off multiple passengers. So there are advantages and disadvantages to each of these operational models. Now, let's think about the benefits. If your car can drive itself, you can relax. You can read or work while you're traveling. Autonomous vehicles can transport people who cannot drive. They have a physical disability, or they're too young, or other constraints. So the benefits include reduced stress, cost savings compared with having a paid driver. So cheaper taxi service, more productivity during travel, and more independent mobility for non-drivers. Now here is here we explore a very important question. That is, what will it cost? How much will an autonomous car cost compared with current cars and compared with current taxis? So in this graph, I compare the projected estimated cost of various forms of vehicles. The blue are the autonomous vehicles. So autonomous cars do require more hardware and more software. They're more expensive. So if you were to own your own car, your own autonomous car, it will probably cost a little bit more than what your current car costs if you average it over say the year. A shared autonomous vehicle, like like a car share vehicle, is going to be relatively inexpensive because it's only carrying one passenger or it's only carrying one group of passengers, and doesn't have a lot of empty backhauls. That is, it's not making a lot of trips empty, traveling to and returning from a pickup. The autonomous taxi will be somewhat more expensive because it requires, frequently it will require cleaning. It'll have many empty backhaul miles or kilometers. And so we project that autonomous taxis will be cheaper than a current taxi, but will cost significantly more than owning per kilometer if you own your own car. So autonomous taxis are they're going to be cheaper than current taxis, but they're not going to be costless. That's one of the key findings of our research. Now, a lot of advocates for autonomous vehicles will imply that autonomous technologies will virtually eliminate crashes. There are reasons to be skeptical. Autonomous vehicles will eliminate some risk. That is, some of the driver errors, but they'll introduce new risks: hardware and software failures, hacking, increased risk-taking when people feel safer. Say other road users might take more risks. There are risks when autonomous vehicles operate together in a platoon. So many vehicles are operating within a few meters of each other. So if there's a failure, it could become much more severe. And autonomous vehicles have the potential of significantly increasing total vehicle travel and therefore increasing risk exposure. Autonomous vehicles themselves are unlikely to reduce traffic congestion. Their potential and experience with other new technologies suggests that they will actually increase congestion by increasing total vehicle travel unless they are carefully managed. For example, it will be tempting for many people many commuters who have their self-driving car take them to work, rather than paying for parking near their work site, to have the car drive home and park during the day at the house. And that means that autonomous vehicle is going to generate 2 trips or let's say 4 trips a day, one going to work, returning home, going back to the work site, and picking up the passenger. So there's a potential increase in total traffic congestion unless those vehicles platoon. They're organized on dedicated traffic lanes to operate very close together. So there's actually, unless cities carefully manage the road space, autonomous technology is likely to increase traffic congestion. Now, as I mentioned, some of the benefits, like reducing traffic congestion, will require autonomous vehicles having dedicated traffic lanes, reducing congestion and pollution, and will require platooning on those dedicated traffic lanes. Now, one of the big questions is, will travelers own their own autonomous vehicles, or will they rely on shared vehicles? A lot of the projected benefits, the optimistic predictions of autonomous vehicles are based on the idea that people will rely on autonomous taxis. But there are many good reasons that people will want to have their own personal cars. Convenience. So, for example, many families want to leave their child seats in their cars, or they have special racks or carriers for example, their sports gear or other equipment. Also, autonomous taxis will introduce delays. So in a city, you might call up an autonomous taxi and reliably have it at your doorstep in less than 5 minutes. But if you're in a suburban or rural area, and especially if you're ordering a particular type of vehicle, so say you need a van or a truck, there could be a 10 to 20 minute delay, at least sometimes, and so you'll have less convenience. Autonomous or shared vehicles tend to be more cost effective if you're a low annual kilometer user. But if you drive a lot, if you're driving to work or running errands every day, it's probably going to be cheaper for you to own your own autonomous vehicle. There are also some concerns about the conditions of the vehicle. So autonomous taxis will probably often have, they'll have rough use. Passengers will sometimes find dirt or graffiti in the vehicles. And finally, many people want to own their own cars for status. They're proud of their cars. And so for all of those reasons, there's good reasons to think that many people will continue to own their own cars, even if autonomous taxis are common and available. Autonomous vehicles will add many costs. So using US dollars, I estimate that the technology adds several $1,000s to the purchase price, say $5,000 to the purchase price, and also will require some subscriptions, for example, to specialized mapping services. And so it'll probably increase the cost of a vehicle by $1,000 to $3,000. Now, a little bit of those costs may be offset by fuel and insurance cost savings, but probably not much. So one of the key questions is, will autonomous technology, autonomous vehicles, increase or reduce total vehicle travel? And there are reasons to think that it could go either way. It could increase vehicle travel simply because it's more convenient and people can drive further in comfort. And also it generates all this additional travel, empty travel going to and from picking up passengers. It could encourage more sprawled development, and it may, and also it increases the travel by non-drivers, by people who can't drive. On the other hand, if it's properly managed, autonomous vehicles could reduce total vehicle travel. They could be part of a system that allows people to shift from owning their own cars to relying on a combination of more walking and bicycling and public transit and self-driving taxis. So if you think of them as part of an ecosystem, and you have transportation demand management incentives that encourage people to use the most efficient mode for each trip, then they can reduce vehicle travel. But it's contingent. We don't know, and it will depend on our public policies. So this table here is way too busy. I'm not going to go into the details, just to show you that I have done the analysis that looks at the full range of benefits and the full range of costs, both to users and to communities. And I recommend that anybody involved in autonomous vehicle planning become familiar with all of these categories of impacts and take them into account in your analysis. So, how long will it take before autonomous vehicles are commercially available and common and start taking over the fleet? Well, my analysis, the implementation of autonomous vehicles has taken longer than some of the optimists predicted. So if you go back 5 or 10 years, many people were saying that by now, by 2020 or 2021, that it would be common for people to rely on self-driving cars, especially shared self-driving taxis. And we haven't got there yet. The commercial availability is starting to occur. So there are some vehicles now that have some components of autonomous operation, but even then, we're not seeing. It'll be several more years before you can go to a car dealer and buy a level 4 or level 5 a self-driving car, and that is affordable to the common person and operates reliably. Is able to drive under most travel conditions. So, optimistically, by 2030, autonomous vehicles might be commercially available, but it takes many years for autonomous technologies or for new vehicle technologies to start becoming common in the fleet. On average, the vehicle fleet turns over about 5% a year. So even if most vehicles that are sold have autonomous technology by, say, 2035 or 2040, it'll be 2050 or 2060 before most vehicles have autonomous vehicle technology. So I'm going to summarize my conclusions. And if anybody wants more information about how we develop these conclusions, I'll show you a link to my report on this subject. Okay, my first conclusion is vehicle innovations tend to be implemented more slowly than other technologies because of the high cost and strict safety requirements and slow fleet turnover of vehicles. So you can look back, for example, at how quickly digital cameras replaced film cameras, but it's very different. The time that it takes to introduce a new vehicle technology is much longer, much slower than something like smartphones or digital cameras. Automobiles cost 50 times as much and last 10 times as long as personal computers and phones. And consumers seldom purchase a new vehicle simply to obtain a new technology. So most vehicles that new vehicle technologies take many years or decades to enter the fleet simply because turnover is slow. And it's possible that many people will continue to prefer driving their own cars. So it's unlikely that most vehicles will be autonomous before, say, 2050, unless large numbers of functional vehicles are scrapped to accelerate deployment. There's considerable uncertainty concerning autonomous vehicle benefits and costs and their travel impacts. Predictions that autonomous vehicles will soon be cheap and ubiquitous or common by 2030 and will displace most private vehicle travel are mostly by people with financial interests in the industry and are based on experience with disruptive telecommunications technologies and probably don't apply realistically to the vehicle technologies. Advocates often exaggerate the benefits of autonomous technologies by ignoring many of the costs and risks and things like the rebound effects, that is the additional vehicle travel that they're going to generate, and potential harms to people who don't use the technology. So that's a very short, brief summary of my research on autonomous vehicle implementation. If you're interested in looking at my analysis and the details of my analysis, visit the Victoria Transport Policy Institute website, that's vtpi.org, and look for the report, Autonomous Vehicle Implementation Predictions, Implications for Transport Planning. So that is the end of my presentation. And now I'd like to go to, there are some polls that we have. Is this a good time to go to the poll questions?
This is, yes, Todd, when I can take over, but before we go to the polls, or maybe, yeah, let's start with one poll that we have, maybe that fixed into you what you were saying, your prediction. When we have autonomous vehicles on the street? So now is the question to the audience, to you all, when do you expect integrated autonomous vehicles on the streets? So you all should now see at the poll section the opportunity to vote the poll. So there you have opportunities from 5 years to 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years, or more than 30 years. So we are very excited what you're thinking about when we should have, or when we expecting autonomous vehicles on the street. Todd was a kind of skeptical for the near future, but maybe the audience is thinking otherwise. So I hope you all can interact and give your imagination of that. So can I show the results? So maybe we can, there are two questions are rise up during your presentation, Todd. Maybe we can answer them. There was one question, there's three questions now. So we're starting with the question from Carlos. So you were talking about this for commute trips, and he's asking how will platooning reduce them? Or how will platooning reduce for commute trips you mentioned?
Let's imagine that you have an autonomous car sitting in your driveway, and you order it to take you to work. Now, in a downtown. Now, let's say that downtown parking costs 10 euros a day. Are you going to pay the 10 euros, or are you going to have your car drive home and park at your house? If you try and save parking dollars, you're going to generate more traffic congestion, more downtown traffic congestion, because your car is making 4 trips a day. It's driving you to work, then it's going home. Then it's driving to your work site to pick you up, and then it's taking you home. So it's doubling the number of downtown trips compared with you driving your car and parking it, leaving it near your work site. So that's one of the ways that autonomous vehicles could increase traffic congestion. If parking is priced but roads are free, it'll be tempting for the users of autonomous vehicles to have their cars drive home or simply drive around the block until you're ready to be picked up. So that's the risk that I want to raise. Now, another risk is that for autonomous vehicles to maximize road efficiency, operating efficiency, they need to be connected and operate in platoons. So let's say 10 cars all drive together within a meter of each other, forming what we call a platoon. If that happens, or that is only possible if those vehicles, if the autonomous vehicles have dedicated traffic lanes, and if there is a crash, let's say there are 10 vehicles all platooning, and car number 3 has a flat tire or some other major failure, then all the rest of the cars could be involved in a massive crash. So there are additional impacts and risks. My point, it's too early to predict exactly how these will occur, but I think planners and policy analysts need to be anticipating the downside of these technologies so we can make sure that we're preventing the problems and we're maximizing the benefits. What do you think, Torben?
Yeah, to sum it up, you're absolutely right in this case, but we should follow up. There is some 2 questions. Maybe you can answer them a little bit more precisely because of our time. The question is: the predictions show a long period of mixed traffic. How should we prepare for that?
Exactly. So that's another one of the technical complications. If you had control of the whole city, you were planning the whole city with a blank slate, conceivably you could design it so that autonomous vehicles operate, so that all vehicles have autonomous technologies and it all works together. But that's very unlikely to occur on Earth. And so the question that planners are going to face is how to optimize your city transportation system when you have mixed. Some vehicles are human driven and some are autonomous. And humans make errors and technology fails. And so we have to anticipate this complicated mix. Imagine, for example, if you were doing your autonomous vehicle planning in Australia. In Australia, you have to worry about kangaroos. In every city you could think of, there will be unique situations that will complicate how autonomous vehicles can fit into the traffic, whether it's the designs of roads or the behavior of people or the mix of pets and other animals, wild animals. All of these, our technologies need to anticipate that. And for the foreseeable future, it's all going to be mixed together. So it's important from a planning perspective. It's important that we plan for this mix. The other question, the third question, asks how quickly level 4 and 5 technologies are likely to be deployed. And if you've been following the technology, the Tesla Corporation has been very optimistic and aggressive about deploying their what's essentially a level 3 technology. And so we can see that in the real world, we're not even seeing true level 4, but we're seeing companies marketing their technology. They're implying that they are level 4, even when they're not. And so I think it's realistic to assume that it'll be several more years before autonomous level 4 technology vehicles are commercially available. And initially, they'll probably be unreliable and expensive. So the average car buyer will hesitate to spend thousands of extra dollars for autonomous vehicle technology, for a vehicle that's capable of self-driving cars under some conditions, but can't operate, for example, in heavy rains or in snow, or when it's traveling someplace that is not on the very sophisticated mapping system. So for those reasons, I think even if it's commercially available, many people will hesitate until it's fully reliable and affordable.
Yeah, Todd, many thanks to your answers. Maybe if there are any additional questions to Todd, you can ask them in the Q&As or in the chat. And now I'm coming to the results from our poll. And there are a kind of people here that are not so skeptical like you, Todd. They're more optimistic, and they're expecting 30% expecting, for example, in 10 years, integrated autonomous vehicles on the streets. Yeah. So this is very equal all the results here in this call. Okay, again, many thanks to you, Todd, but now we are going from Canada to Belgium, and now we are traveling exactly to Ghent to my colleague from my EU project. So I completely missed out to say to you all that I am part of the Interact EU project, Automated Road Transport Planning, and Esen is a colleague of mine, and now she's telling you about how we can catch the people and how we can involve vulnerable groups to interact and to sensitize to autonomous vehicles and automated mobility. Esen, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Torben, for the introduction, and Todd for a very interesting presentation too. I will share my screen now. You can see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So hi, everyone. As Torben mentioned, my name is Esen Köse. I am a project manager at Mpact. We are a non-profit organization from Belgium, and as Torben also already mentioned, also one of the partners from the Interact North Sea region Art Forum project that focuses on creating more awareness with the stakeholders on the impact and the upswing of automated road transport. In this presentation, I would like to discuss with you present you the miseducation of automated vehicles. Now, I will explain later on what I mean with this title, the miseducation of automated vehicles. But to sum my presentation up, I will be discussing the importance of involvement of stakeholders, more importantly, users and vulnerable users. But before we start, let's interact a little bit. I have 2 questions for you in the poll. The first question is, in your opinion, how much insight does the mobility world already have in the mobility needs of vulnerable groups? I can see if there are already answers coming in. Can you see it, Torben? I only see my screen right now. Or maybe we can look at the results at the end. Maybe that's interesting. Yeah. The second question is, the second poll, do you find it difficult to involve vulnerable groups when creating a transport solution? I think it's really obvious that we will discuss the importance of vulnerable groups in this presentation now. Yes?
Maybe we skip this last question by the end of the presentation, but I think it's not able to answer 2 questions.
Okay, no problem at all. Okay, we'll come back to it later on.
Yeah.
I'll start my presentation then. Now, why the miseducation of automated vehicles? The meaning behind this title has 2 layers. The first layer is about the fact that when we hear about automated road transport, we often speak about the fact that we should educate ourselves on the technology, know more about it, the possible social and economic impact of these vehicles, and in general, just be ready when these vehicles show up. Which is good, which is also very necessary and important. But another thing that is also important is the fact that, beside the fact that we should educate ourselves on, the information of automated vehicles, that we should and we can be able to educate automated vehicles too. With that, I mean, automated vehicles will be data-driven. they will function, or their added value will be seen by the data they receive from us. And this data can be about, the public space that they drive around in, or the other transport modes that they will cross on the road, but also about the certain groups that they will take to a certain destination, or the needs that they will solve for those groups. And to know that, to give that right data, I think the mobility world still needs to educate themselves on the current challenges they experience, not in the public space, not with other transport, not only with other transport modes, but also with the needs of the people, the users that will be using these vehicles. And more importantly, the users that are already being forgotten. Those are often mentioned as vulnerable people or poorly served people. So that was the first layer of the meaning behind this title. And the second layer is about linked to popular culture, more specifically to this lady. Do you know who this lady is? Please, if you know her name, write it down in the chat. I'm very curious about your input. I will give you some tips. She is a American rapper who was a legendary rapper who was very popular in the 90s, and she was a member of the group called the Fugees. I don't know if our participants are involved or if they love hip hop. I can see, is there any input coming in from the chat? Torben?
Yeah, Mathieu is knowing her. He's right, it's Lauryn Hill.
Indeed, Lauryn Hill. So you're probably thinking now, what on the earth could be the link between Lauryn Hill, an American rapper, and automated vehicles? Well, it's not about her, but it's about the first album that she brought out. It's called The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. And that album was quite groundbreaking in the music world, more specifically in the hip-hop world too. She was a black female, making her own music, writing her own songs. And when she made that album, she was also pregnant. Now, all those things back then, those were quite exceptional and in some ways even taboo for a rapper to become a mother and to still make her own music. So that's why her album became some kind of a representation of black feminism. But beside all of that, her songwriting was very strong. And the way she represented the black female was very important. Now, you see the lyrics of one of her songs. It's called Lost Ones. And when I was preparing for this presentation, I was listening to this song. And the song is about the fact that she once left the group called the Fugees. And it's about the frustrations and being in the disadvantaged position. But despite the fact that the message is quite about frustrations, the tone of voice of the lyrics are empowering. It's fierce, it's feminine, and it's powerful at the same time. And with her lyrics, Lauryn Hill showed that a black woman could be multidimensional in comparison with the quite basic representation of black women in the general media. And this, when I read this, and when I read this right now too, I don't think that this only fits for black women in music culture or vulnerable groups in general, but also vulnerable groups in transport. When we see how we talk or how we see vulnerable groups in transport, we often see them as like some kind of a static, passive group that, that is in a disadvantaged situation and they need help, and we are the ones who are going to save them. That is often the tone of voice that we hear when we talk about, creating new transport solutions. So in the last couple of years, in the last 10 to 20 years, we have come up with new technologies, or as Todd mentioned in his presentation, we improve current technologies to hopefully serve people much better and improve our mobility system. But still, despite the fact that a lot of new solutions are coming up, there are still people, who are like falling behind or being behind, or who are not being helped, not on purpose, of course. And this is why I wanted to talk about one of the examples or work that we did with one of the groups that could also be mentioned as vulnerable groups, more specifically students. why students in a very short amount of time, students experience or have to make very big life decisions, from choosing a field of study to choosing how to spend or save their often small amount of money, but also how they will travel, their transport options. And these choices, they can create some level of stress and inequality. And I'm not even talking about the differences in their social and economical background yet. And this makes students a very eligible group for more research, with keeping an eye on the fact that they are a representation of how our society will look like in 5 to 10 years. Now, as Mpact, when we were thinking about trying to reach students and trying to, let them think critically about automated vehicles, we launched a platform called A Tribe Called Transport, which was launched in September 2019. And when we decided to reach students, we also realized the fact that we don't know much about their situations, about how they live, how they travel, and which part or which role or the importance of mobility in their world. So we kind of created some kind of a strategy to reach them and to try to involve them, not only with general mobility, but also new solutions such as automated road transport. We started out with trying to gain new insights by doing research, small research, by not only asking them on their mobility, on the mobility challenges that they experience, their mobility needs, but also their current knowledge. What do they already know about automation, automated road transport? What do they know about sustainable mobility in general, or shared mobility? So that was the first step in the process. The second process was to take it to next level by creating more awareness and talk value, to really let them reconsider not only their current travel behavior, but also their possible future travel behavior. For that, we launched Lost Lectures, and we coached a student from the University of Hasselt with his thesis. I will discuss all of this later on in my presentation too. And the last part of our strategy was about engagement. It's not about, talking passively about students and trying to figure out some solutions for them, but really involving them actively on solving their own mobility needs and the challenges that they experience. Now, I will discuss these 3 steps with you by starting out with the research that we did that was launched in 2020, so during the pandemic. We had 326 respondents. It's not that much, and we are also not researchers, but the results gave us the insights that we needed to go to the other steps. As you can see, this is one of the results that we had on the question on the reliability of several transport modes after Corona. As you can see, and as we all know, I think the King car has been claiming its position again during the pandemic, but also the bike had a big upswing, and of course going on foot was very popular. But the most interesting thing for us was the cloud with no opinion. There you see the e-scooter, shared bike, mostly the micro-mobility solutions and the shared mobility solutions. And this is quite interesting to see, because when we often talk about automated vehicles, we talk about them, or the biggest condition for the implementation or the planning of automated vehicles are often, they should be shared. They should not be privately owned, they should be shared. And it's interesting to see that students don't have an opinion on shared mobility or micro-mobility solutions yet. And the other interesting thing is that we also did the research in 2019, another small research, and there we saw the same thing, that when we talk about shared mobility, they often don't have an opinion on that. So this creates the question of, is there some kind of a lack of knowledge on this shared mobility? Should there be more knowledge if you want to go towards planning, more concrete planning of automated road transport? And in addition to that, another question was about the ownership, how they look at ownership of several transport modes. As you can see on the visual, they are quite positive on owning a bike or owning a public transport subscription, but they are 72.1% says that it doesn't need to own a car, its own car anymore. So this is quite interesting to see, because when we talk about shared mobility, it's often about not owning but using transport modes. So there is a mental shift going on about, you know, letting go the ownership, but there is still a gap of knowledge, we think, on, you know, taking the big step towards more shared mobility. So these are all things that are eligible for future research. Another important thing in our small survey was that we wanted to have an insight on the frequent trips that students make in during their academic year. And in this visual, we asked them about, you know, for which trip they needed improvement the most. And as you can see, the trips from the parental home to class or to student accommodation had the most votes, let's say, and going out too. But we think that the question pops up in our minds of, you know, parental home to class or parental home to student accommodation. Is this because of the longer distance they have to make, or is it because of the fact that they have to change several transport modes before they can reach their class from their parental home? So these are also questions that could be answered in the future. Another thing that we did about their general transport behavior was about the challenges that they experience during those 4 frequent trips that they often make. And delays and loss of time were the challenges that popped up most often by the students. Now, beside of these general questions, we also presented them some statements about self-driving vehicles. Now, we're talking about self-driving vehicles in this research and not about automated road transport, because we think like we were really going to the basic with this small survey, really going like trying not to do the technological complex explanation of these vehicles because we thought that they don't have that knowledge yet. So we try to keep the questions as simple and as accessible as possible. So that's why we used self-driving vehicles. As you can see, they think that most of them, 36.5%, rather agree on the fact that self-driving vehicles will provide more safety on the road. Does that mean that they trust technology more, or 5G, for example, which is quite being discussed in the newspaper, which has been being discussed in the newspapers in 2020 on, you know, the privacy and other things. So does this mean that they trust technology more than human beings? And if so, will this trust create more risky actions on the road by active road users or not? So these are also questions that can be asked for future research. Another thing that already also popped in the previous visuals were about the collective or the private use of self-driving vehicles. And as you can see, self-driving vehicles will only be of interest for collective use and not for private use, and 24.2% rather disagree. So there is still this maybe this vision on self-driving vehicles that it should be owned, privately owned, and not be shared with other people. And last but not least, the self-driving car is the most recent attempt of the industry to secure the primacy of the car. 33.1% agreed on this. The vision behind this statement was to see whether they think it is really needed, whether these vehicles are really needed. Are there other possible solutions that are more easy to implement, more easy to plan, maybe less technological, that could have a more added value than self-driving or automated vehicles? So from the insights gained from this small research that we did, we went to the next step by the step of awareness and talk value, and we created a concept called lost lectures. It's actually a very cool word for interactive guest lecture. We worked together with several universities and colleges, and we created lectures on the possible impacts of automated road transport. As you can see on the slide, we did, for example, one with the University Hasselt on the impact of automated vehicles on different transport modes. Now, this lecture looks like this. The first session, or the first part of the lecture, is all about two experts who share their vision and their expertise on automated vehicles based on the theme of the lecture. And the second part is for the students who should prepare questions and ask questions and really think critically about the information that they get of the experts on the impact of automated vehicles. And for example, with the University of Hasselt and the University of Ghent, we really challenge the students to choose one transport mode or choose one vulnerable group, for example, elderly people, and really ask questions from the perspective of those groups, of the perspective of that transport mode. So these lectures really gave us the chance to not only introduce the concept of automated road transport to students in a educational environment, but we really also gave them the space to critically think about it and to reconsider not only this new technology, but also the possible impact of this new technology in their own lives. Another thing that we did was coaching a student with his thesis. And the title of the thesis was like this: what are the possible impacts or the added value of automated shuttles in the transport region in Limburg? Now, Flanders has been working on transport regions since 2019. The concept of transport regions, or the vision behind transport regions, is all about basis accessibility. Now, Flanders wants to change their vision on how they look at mobility. Before, we looked at mobility as in basic mobility. It was more supply-sided. But from now on, from 2022 on, we want to look at it more from the basic accessibility side, more the demand side. More specifically, how can we help people reach the destination that they want to reach? And for this, Flanders divided the region in 15 transport regions. And at the same time, since 2018, Belgium has been testing automated shuttles in Belgium through several pilot projects. So the idea behind coaching the student was, how can we bring the transport regions that is also currently going on and very actual, and with the pilot projects going on in Belgium since 2018. So the student has been working on it since September 2020, and he is almost finished. So we are looking forward to share his solutions, hopefully one day with you in a couple of weeks or a couple of months. But this was also a very interesting way to involve it. Here it was one student, but we want to do this, coaching students more in the future. This is a very interesting way to not only involve them, but let them also really do research on it and also think critically on this new technology. And last but not least, the engagement part. We launched an international student challenge. As I mentioned in the first insight part, we did some research to really gain insights on the needs and the challenges and their knowledge. And based on that new insight, we launched this international student challenge to not only, us thinking about or trying to find a solution for their challenges, but really involve them and let them create their own solutions for their own challenges that they experience in the local environment. And as you can see, the challenge goes like this: how can we improve the mobility experience of students during their trips to their class or campus? And we give them a lot of freedom of how they interpret this challenge. And but the only condition is that they should focus on their trips from their parental home or the student accommodation to their class. Now, by doing all of this, this is all work in progress. And by the way, this challenge is still going on. So if you're a university or a university who could be interested in this, you can still contact us for this. The challenge will start in October 2021. This is all work in progress, and it's still going on, and we still need to learn more, but we already have some lessons learned that I would like to share with you. First of all, think or act out of the box. Innovation, when we talk about innovation, automated road transport is also a part of innovation. And this innovation often comes with creativity. And to come to that creativity, we need to listen more to our target groups. What do they need? We really need to consider what they tell us, while keeping an eye on what is achievable for our project or for the solution that we are coming up with. So that is one of the important things of, involving your potential users or your target group. Another thing is getting out of your bubble. It's quite ironic to say that out loud in these trying times, but it's do not expect your target group to find you. You still need to go and find where they hang out, or what are the most important places in their life where you can find them and involve them in your project or in your solution. And in addition to that, the next point, collaboration, is very important. For us, when we wanted to reach students with automated road transport, or collaboration with colleges and universities were very important. But also, beside of students, if you want to reach other vulnerable users and involve them in new technologies such as automated road transport, try to look for organizations who are directly in contact with these target groups, because they know them the best and they know their needs and the moments that they are available the most and the best. Another point is future generations. Keep an eye on the future generations, ask them on their vision, ask them on their knowledge, on their needs, because the students of now don't have the same needs as the students of 5 years ago, and same for the students of 5 years in the future. So that's really a target group that's really eligible of doing more research towards, but also keeping an eye on the evolution and changing, because their life really changes a lot in a very short amount of time. And last but not least, system thinking. It's all about asking questions and not jumping into conclusions, and looking at underlying structures to see which underlying structures are keeping certain patterns alive, and decide which destination you want to go with your solution, and which role your solution can play in the life of that vulnerable group. Thank you for your attention. I hope I could give you some new insights on how to involve your target group when planning for automated road transport or other transport solutions. And maybe we can do our last poll, Torben.
Yeah, it's already started, so okay. I can show the results now. So if you can see this, by the first question, in your opinion, how much insight does the mobility world have in the mobility needs of vulnerable groups? Almost can you see it? So I can say to you that almost 90% are talking about not much. So yeah. So you pointed out how we can do that. That it's not just not much, that we have to do a lot of more of these activities to involve these groups. And the other question is, do you find it difficult to involve vulnerable groups when creating a transport solution? And yeah, you're talking about yes, about 73%, and no, 27%. So do you have something to add, or before we can close, maybe you have some final statements you can pronounce?
I think the final statement could be the importance of keeping an eye on students. Again, I'm kind of repeating myself again here, but I think in a very short amount of time, I mean, when I think at of my own student life, I took the train the first time when I started to go to college and to university. So that was the first time that I really had to reconsider how I was traveling. So that is very important. And co-creation. I think co-creation is something that needs more attention. It is getting the attention, I think, but there's still work to do. And maybe not to sound too negative about automated road transport, but also look at the current challenges that are going on. Is technology really the solution for these vulnerable groups? Should we also look for solutions that are not technological. So the social side of innovation is also very important.
Okay, thank you for this, Esen. There's just a question in the Q&As, but maybe you can answer it by yourself because it's regarding to your results.
Okay, great. I will answer Carlos.
Yeah. So many thanks to Esen. So we have to catch up a little bit of time. So I will finish now our session. And Esen did a great step into talking about what Art Forum, the project we both are involved at doing. So we're talking about co-creation and involving people to sensitize automated road transport. And so let's. So I now will share my screen with you. I hope you can see it. Yeah. Okay. So we already talked about Art Forum, and this is a good summary what Todd is talking about all the prediction and what we're expecting in the future. And Esen was talking about how we can do this, how we can do or interact and act to build the future of mobility regarding to automated mobility. So, and I will sum up a little bit and we'll raise up the question, are we even prepared for automated mobility? Something Todd has already talked about and Esen give us insights as well. And I'm talking about more the pathway and the adapting opportunities we have for the future. But before I start, I will give an overview of our project. So we are an Interreg North Sea region project. We have 14 partners all around the North Sea region. We are from Belgium, Denmark, Germany, the Netherlands, and Norway, and the United Kingdom. So, and we're running 3.5 years and ending by the summer of next year. So, and our organization, the Free Hanseatic City of Bremen, is the lead beneficiary, the lead coordinator of this project. So I'm in this position. So, and what are we doing? So our overall objects are raise awareness. So something Esen was talking about, and by the end to show the authorities, so the communities, the regions, the cities who are not very good prepared for automated mobility. So what we want to do is develop policy recommendations that they know what to do when. That's the question we raised up, when automated mobility is coming. So we want to interact, or we want to motivate to support sustainable transport plans to integrate this topic by now to be prepared when it's coming. So what we are doing, we have some pilots running, for example, in Aalborg, Denmark. We are doing scenario work. For example, the German Aerospace Center, the DLR is doing, or the Robert Gordon University in Aberdeen. And we're doing a lot of effort on social and economic impacts like Mpact is doing, but also other NGOs like Autodel Net or small planning enterprises like Mobility Zeiten. So, and we want all compromise all things that is important for the future of automated road transport by these overall objectives that the local stakeholders understand potential and risk of impact of the technologies, and maybe that the developers can understand the needs of the communities in which their technologies will deploy. And so we have this so-called core think tank where we interact and where we want to produce our results, and maybe a little bit provoke, a little bit acting like others are not doing. And Dylan and Esen gave us good insights how we do this, maybe on vulnerable groups. Yeah, did some activities. We see the pilot in Aalborg. We see some very interactive autonomous lab where all the participants of the event of Shared Mobility Rocks in Brussels 2019 were means of transport, and there have to be some bicycles, some pedestrian, or some conventional cars, also autonomous cars, and so all the participants have to interact on this session to get sensitized what it means to be a part of autonomous traffic. And we did a lot of workshops, but of course we're handling with all circumstances, so we had a lot of adaptability in our project, so we have to do a lot of events and workshops online, and yeah, that's the pandemic is involving us as well, and what we are adapting very well to this situation. So when we're talking about the whole mobility system and what is the approaches, and when we're talking about automated mobility, and we have these steps here from development. So we're talking about first the steps into the vehicle, then into the traffic, and then into the technical traffic system. So this is all the technical stuff. So this is what the technical side, the developers are deploying. But the next steps are the important steps. So how can we build up this social mobility system, and how we can build up to integrate it into the whole environment, maybe in residential and economic areas. So this is the society, and that's the part, and this is the last part in which our project is approaching, and which is from my side and our side very important that it's not forgotten by the when we're talking about automated mobility, so here I have this approach of fusion mobility. It is very important that in the middle of all implementation about automated road transport, we're talking about the human scale. So it's very important that we have to involve the society. And in this case, some kind of active mobility is very important, because the disruptive factor in all the implementation is pedestrians and bicycles. When we talk about automated mobility, it is not so good connected. And of course, on the macro level, the social and environmental factors that I can explain more deeply in the following slides. By starting our projects, we did a little workshop. So, and there was some expectation we are asking for about special areas between the difference of urban, interurban, or rural. And for example, the expectation in the 5 or 20 years, and when we take a look on the 20 years, then here we see that we are talking about automated public transit, but no private transit. So here we're talking about the hope is that autonomous mobility will be public and not private. So that we're talking about sharing, and we're talking about maybe platooning. Todd is talking about, but platooning with the question, is it good or is it bad, or having this heaven or hell scene scenario by the end? Do we have more traffic or less traffic? And because of my time issues, I will not to go into more details to this. So I will show you this approach that, in my opinion, shows very good what is important for the implementation of autonomous vehicles. This is the so-called multi-level perspective model. So this is a social technical approach, and this will show how technical transitions come about and how interactions of all these so-called levels interact, and how they can raise up new innovations like automated mobility, and they come into the regime of these social technical regime, in this case of using mobility. So we have these three levels. This is the niche on the micro level. These are small networks or innovations that are rising up and coming to the regimes, but there is a process doing how these regimes will fix into the whole system. And the higher level, the landscapes are interacting, and they are this so-called landscapes are not changing very fast. So we're talking about the climate, and we're talking about maybe the pandemic at this time. So that is something that we human are not able to change. And this is some illustration of this multi-level perspective on automobility. So this niche, for example, are sharing electromobility, and of course the AVs. So I put it in here, autonomous vehicles. And so how they can interact, or how they can come into the regime and to change traffic management, to change the automotive industry and the travel behavior. So when we talk about automated mobility, this illustration for me, very important innovations that have to be come in to build up a whole system of connected mobility. For example, are of course sharing the 5G opportunities, the drive technologies at all, and of course the infrastructure management and so on. And the regimes that have to be changed are of course the meaning of cars and the acceptance and the regulation process, what is very difficult and very to handle at this time in many countries. And for the landscape, so we're talking about digitalization. That is the very important part, because without digitalization, and I'm talking about 5G, for example, it's not possible that autonomous vehicles can implement. So when we're talking about now on automated road transport, so we have the landscapes, we have these regimes with the different items, for example, science, culture, technology, infrastructure, acceptance, and the market. And we have us as a project, as an EU project art forum. So we are the called network. We are important to recombine the social innovation and the technical innovation. And we're doing this with the activities Esen is talking about. So, and if we are able to come into the regime, if we are doing our work and interacting with everybody in our work on engagement and raise up in capacity building, because we're doing work on public space and socio-economic impacts and so on. So I see us as some kind of these niche innovations, and of course in the time scale there are a lot of failure of these innovations, but when it's coming through these regimes, we have to we can change the mobility as a service, and we can confidence in the systems. And we have this high-duty mobile network, 5G G elements, we can interact and change the special areas, for example, and the structures and the liability and regulation and the sensing as a whole. So if we're talking about all these things that have to be changed to have a whole connected, but a high connected automated society, then is this very important. The first steps are from us, from the actor, that we are changing the thinking, and then it's easy to get into the regimes and change this society or the acceptance on using high connected automated vehicles and build up some kind of, so I call it high connected automated. So I will catch up. It's important to know this is an example of implementation smart mobility in a rural area in Germany. It's the Heinsberg region, and this research from Gross Frengels and Fromhold-Eisewitz, not so easy names. They're talking about impeding factors and promoting factors, and they have these order from the multi-level as well, but on the regional level. So they have, for example, for the promoting factors on the actors, what we have to do, communication and marketing. This is what Mpact, for example, is doing. We have to do civil participation, so-called co-creation. That is the promoting factors. And other promoting factors is here the digitalization as well as an example, and of course policy measures. And the impeding factors, it's very obvious. We're talking about car dependency and last mile coverage, regional funding, or the legislation. But here we're talking about rural transport. So I try to adapt it into automated road transport. And there's in many cases the same, but for example, at the actor micro level, so we have this opportunity to do applications and pilots that the people can test out autonomous shuttles, for example. And yeah, so the other things you can see by, so I will not go into detail because of the time. But to sum up a little bit, what Todd was talking about, I built up some memes, so and to say what is important for the future and to show what are the challenges and risks are. So if you see here, you want to run a self-driving bus at this moment. So you're very optimistic, you can put it on, and we see it by our partners how difficult and how much time it costs to and effort to build up or to put these shuttles on the street. By now, there are these regulation processes, and there are some factors that you have to be in mind at by now. The other thing is the mixed traffic. The question was rising up by Todd. So if we're talking about implementation autonomous vehicles, so it's very, you have to be sure that these pedestrians or the bicycles are some disruptive factor that are not easy to interact with autonomous vehicles, because we are humans and we are interacting disruptive and not as many computers or KIs are thinking about. So this mixed traffic, especially in the urban areas, are very important, that we have to consider it for the future, and that it will take a long time that we can implement automated road transport, especially in urban areas because of that. So maybe on railways that is possible, but here, yeah. And the other thing is we're talking about these levels we have, and everybody, especially industry and politics, are just seeing level 5. So the other levels are not that important. and so it's important that we can maybe go into more detail to build up level 3 or 4 before we can talk about autonomous. So if we don't need even a steer, and we have the opportunity to take off, and at this level 5 is the last case when all the public transport enterprises are reducing the personal costs, but it takes a long time. And so, yeah, we have to be realistic, especially in the definition we're talking about. Not everything where is standing autonomous on it is autonomous in. So it's all the shuttles and buses that are driving at the moment are not even automated in many cases because of the operators. They are some kind of fun, they're amusement, but so not very integrated in the whole. And therefore, it's very important to engage the societies, because that the industry develops automated driving not alone. And for example, Art Forum as a project will raise awareness and capacity building of automated driving, and that the industry or politics just not involved, or then not want to pull it that way, like our project is, for example. Okay, so we are running out of time, so I have to skip this and to come a solution to sum up my presentation. I will sum up some results we had with our project on another presentation. When we're talking about, we have to answer the questions why. For example, why, if autonomous vehicles are the solution, what is the problem? We have to talk about how. So Esen was talking about that we how we can do this, and also who, for example, the vulnerable groups. But for example, how that we have to mobilize all stakeholders, all people, all people that interact with autonomous vehicles, and that we should learn, before we learn driverless, we should learn how to share the cars, because we want to reduce the traffic and change the mobility, and not that it's keep on this conventional car using. Okay. This is my last thing on this. By the end, I have some poll that raise up a little bit our whole session. In your opinion, what is the biggest challenge towards the implementation of automated transport? So
before the time is running out, Todd and as many in your presentation, have you some final statements or final things to say?
I would like to say thank you for Urbanism Next for this good opportunity for the presentation, and thank you for you, Torben, for moderating it, and Todd, especially for your presentation. And yeah, thank you everyone for participating too.
Yes, I thank you very much. Thank you all for attending this workshop, this presentation. We live in a very exciting time. There's change coming. A lot of it is difficult to predict. That makes it exciting. That's what planners and researchers love, is to take the challenges of an unpredictable future and try and develop guidelines, practical guidelines for preparing for that future. So I hope everybody that participated in this session has received some insights, is able to develop some understanding so that we will better prepare for the exciting future that includes autonomous vehicles, but all kinds of other integration of all kinds of other modes of transportation, everything from basic walking and bicycling to much more improved public transit, and the role of autonomous vehicles in that future. So thank you very much.
Again, thank you to Todd, thank you to Esen, thank you for the great last word. Thank you to Next Urbanism for the opportunity for us to share our thoughts and our insights and our outcomes here with you. If you have any questions to us, I don't know, but I will be here at the Next Urbanism, and if you have any questions, maybe Todd and Esen, you can interact with us and go into a detail and talk about us about automated mobility in the future. And for this, if you both have nothing to add at this moment, then many thanks again, and we see us in the future. We don't know. I was not saying.
Thank you, everybody.
Autonomous or not, it will be a good future.
I hope so. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.